Several weeks ago, we announced the completion of our stewardship campaign, Through It All, Woof. At that time, I told you that the people who know stuff were confident we'd meet our $200,000 goal. And although we were only at $179,000 at the time, I personally believed them because, they know stuff. But today, I am here to tell you that those people who know stuff do indeed know stuff, because with a total of 111 pledges in, we have reached $211,000 in pledges. Through it all, Woof is not only there. Woof is not only optimistic. Woof is not only supportive and willing to rally to a cause, but through it all, Woof comes through.
Good morning. Welcome to the virtual Sunday service of the West Hills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, affectionately known as WOOF. My name is Kim Transier. I use the pronouns she and her, and it is my privilege to be your lay leader this morning. Whoever and wherever you are at this moment, we want you to know that you are welcome here. Regardless of your age or abilities, the color of your skin or where you were born, whom you love or how you identify your gender, whatever your spiritual practices or if you have none, we're glad you're with us this morning. All of us are local to this virtual community of conscience and compassion. Please check the announcements in your order of service to see what else is happening this week. Your order of service is in the email that came to you this morning, and so is your invitation to the budget forum online at 11:30. Our usual coffee hour will return next Sunday. If you're new to us and not getting these emails yet, get in touch with our congregational administrator, whose contact information is on our website, woof.net. And now, as I light our chalice, I offer you these words from Reverend Scott Taylor, entitled In Honor of First Steps. We light this chalice in honor of first steps, for beginning even when the path ahead is unclear, for the courage it takes to trust that light will come to clarify our vision, that friends will be by our side. May the words, song, stillness, and common breath of this hour remind us that every step of the way is never one we take alone. Please speak with me now our opening affirmation. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to learn what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. Today's service is called The Art of Loss, and we're excited to host the Reverend Julie Taylor as our speaker. Reverend Julie is a Unitarian Universalist community minister, is the Senior Director of Contextual Ministry at Meadville Lombard Theological School, and serves as a chaplain with the New York Air National Guard. Reverend Julie is the current president of the UU Trauma Response Ministry, being a specialist in critical incident response, trauma, and disaster spiritual care. Reverend Julie will give today's reading.
The reading this morning is written by M. Susan Milner. We pause this hour to remember those whom we have lost, those whom we fear losing, those from whom we are separated, those to whom we would extend a helping hand, the caring heart, the will to live. We pause this hour also to hope for life and good living, for love and for kind words, for reconciliation, for the support of family and friends, for meaning in our struggles, for wholeness. May our memories and hope renew us for the days and nights to come.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there
Love After Love by Derek Walcott. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life.
So the story for all ages today is adapted from a book called The Lotus Seed. The Lotus Seed, which is written by Sherry Garland, and it's illustrated by Tatsuro Kiyuchi. It's a beautifully illustrated book, and I highly recommend finding it at the library or picking it up somewhere. It's really gorgeous. And this is kind of my retelling of this story. So this is a story of a girl and her grandmother's memory. This little girl called her grandmother Ba. And so that's what I'm going to call the grandmother in this story. So this little girl's grandmother, Ba, was from Vietnam. And when her grandmother was a little girl, she lived near the emperor's home. Now, at this time in Vietnam, wow, this was a country that was caught up in war and conflict that went on for very, very many years. One night, Ba was a little girl at the time, snuck onto the palace grounds and took a seed from a lotus pod in the imperial garden. Now, a lotus is a flower that has a lot of seeds in it. So Ba took this seed from this lotus pod. She went home then, took the seed, and she wrapped that in a piece of silk and hid it under her family's altar. And then whenever she felt sad or lonely, she took out the seed and she looked at it and she held it in her hand and she remembered that emperor and her friends and her family who were brave, even though sometimes things were scary. And then when Ba got a little older, she got married and she had children. And then the wars came back. And her husband became a soldier and he went to war and he got killed and he didn't come home. And then one day the bombs fell all around her home, and more soldiers came and they went door to door to tell the people that they needed to leave so that they could be safe. And Ba, she took the time to grab that seed, and then Ba and her children crowded onto a boat. They left their home and they crowded onto a boat and they set off in a really stormy sea. Ba watched the mountains and the palms of her home slowly fade away. She held that seed in her shaking fingers and she silently said goodbye. And the boat was on the ocean for many days. Eventually she arrived in a strange new land, the United States. This new land had blinking lights and speeding cars and towering buildings. It was nothing like the home that she knew. There was also a language that she didn't understand. Now, Ba, as she grew older, then worked for many years. She worked all day, she worked nights, she worked many jobs, and her children did the same, and her sisters and her cousins also. They worked very hard, and they all lived together in a big house. Now, many years now later, Ba was a grandmother. And now here we come to the little girl. Her granddaughter, she found that seed. She found that seed and she got curious. She asked Ba questions about this lotus blossom. And she asked questions about the emperor and about Vietnam. This lotus seed, she found it fascinating. And one day, the little girl, she stole that seed from that piece of silk that was wrapped and underneath the family altar, and she planted it. She planted it in a pool of mud somewhere. I think it was somewhere She thought it was somewhere maybe near Ba's onion patch. Well, Ba cried and cried when she found out that the seed was gone. She didn't eat, she didn't sleep. And you know what? The little girl, she could not remember where she planted that. Oh, and then one day in the spring, grandmother Ba shouted. She yelled and everybody ran into the garden. And you know what they saw? They saw a beautiful pink lotus unfurling its petals. It is the flower of life and hope, Ba said. No matter how ugly the mud or how long the seed lies dormant, the bloom will be beautiful. The bloom will be beautiful. It is the flower of my country. When that lotus blossom faded and turned into a pod, Ba gave each of her grandchildren a seed to remember her by. And then she kept one for herself to remember the emperor and that garden and her home. Now, Ba's granddaughter, she wrapped her seed in a piece of silk and she hid it in a secret place. And when she gets older, she will plant it and give those seeds to her children. And she'll tell them about the emperor, about Vietnam, and about her grandmother.
And now, as we enter a moment of silence for prayer, meditation, or reflection, I invite you to speak the name of anyone you would like to welcome into our circle of caring and compassion.
The river is flowing, flowing and growing. The river is flowing down to the sea. Mother, carry me, child, I will always be. Mother, carry me down to the sea.
Good morning. I'm so grateful to be with you here this morning. And while I've never been to West Hills UU Fellowship in person, I actually spent a good number of years just a little further south of you in Salem and Kaiser. I went to high school there. In fact, I'm a McNary Celtic. Most of my family is still in the area. And so it's really good to be with you and feel a little bit of connection to home today. So thank you for the invitation. Oh boy, a lot has happened over this last year or so. It has been a year of loss. And that's not always easy to talk about. It's just so much. This pandemic, over 500,000 people dead in this country alone. You know about the fires, right? I remember my mom seeing pictures out her window of red, just the sky being red. Unbelievable. The extrajudicial killing of Black and brown people. White supremacy has been unabashed and unashamed. Attacks on those with Asian and Pacific Islander heritage, the undermining of democracy, mass shootings, protests for justice. That's just some, and that's just some of what has happened for us kind of as a collective. And then on the personal side, there's things like people losing jobs or uncertainty in jobs, careers ending, thinking they were going to get started and then shifting and changing, illness, certainly, deaths of people that we care deeply for. And then there's things that I don't know, just we might not even recognize always as being a big deal because they don't seem quite as big as some of the things that I just listed. Things like, this year, a lot of kids didn't get to go to school for the first day of school, like starting first grade at school. They had to start it online. And other kids at the other end, and not so much kids, right? Some of them young adults and adults not being able to attend a graduation in person. I'm just going to take a breath for a second. It's just a big list. And it's not even remotely everything. Everybody. We've all got a story. We've all got something else that we could list. And you know what? It's real. That's all real. I read an article in the last month on the Huffington Post. The article was called "How to Process Grief Caused by COVID-19 Even When You Didn't Lose Someone." It was by the author was Kylie Rodriguez Cairo. And one of the quotes from that article, which I felt was really pretty useful, the article as a whole, but one of the quotes I thought was really important. She said, "Grief is a reaction to loss, and not all loss is about death. There's no such thing as a grief hierarchy. Grief is grief." It's pretty wise. It's going to take a lot of work to heal. It's going to take a lot of work to heal. Healing isn't like a decision that you can just make, right? Or a declaration to be made and it begins, right? Healing is a process. And for many of us this past year, beginning the process of healing is going to require the work of grief. Now, a lot of you have probably heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, right? How people go through it. It gets talked about a lot. Now, that's a complicated thing. If you actually read Kubler-Ross's original book and things that she's even talked about since, she actually has regretted calling what she wrote about in that book stages of grief, because it's been misinterpreted over and over again, including by like people who should probably know better. I know some of the classes that I've taken in psychology over the years, I've had professors misquote and misinterpret her work. I won't go into all the details of that, but her book and her research, those stages of grief that she describes, right? Denial and bargaining, all these pieces, right? That came from research that she did on terminal patients describing their own experience of their own impending death, not the experience of the people that loved them or people that worked with them, the outsiders' experience of a death. That is not what it was. And so the first thing I want to say is, let's just pull apart and maybe not think about grief in those stages, okay? Because it's not even what she was talking about. And it's not really helpful either, because if you really consider and think about how grief, you have experienced it, right? It's not linear. It's not discrete. One thing doesn't start and the next piece starts, or you finish this and then you go on to the next. That is not how grief works in reality. It's not in linear stages. It's not even a parabola, right? That's predictable. You know what grief is? Grief is a bowl of spaghetti. That's what it is. It's all tangled up and it's connected, and it's pulling on one strand is going to tug on another, and it's messy. And every bowl of it's different. Grief is different for everybody. So now I'm talking about food and grief, and it makes me think about a really great book that I love. It's a picture book, but honestly, it's good for anyone at any age, I think. And this book is called Tear Soup, written by Pat Schweibert and Chuck DeCline. Now, this book, and I'm not going to tell the whole story here because I've got another story that I'm going to refer to in a minute, right? But Tear Soup a grandmother, Grandy is her name. She experiences a loss, and she goes home and she begins to make this tear soup, and she cries into it. Again, it's an illustrated book. She cries, and there's different ingredients, and she's making her tear soup. And this book describes her process. And friends come over and want to give her their recipe for tear soup. Oh, here's my recipe. And she says, no, I have my recipe. This is my tear soup. And she makes it. And the ingredients are, the tears, the memories, all of these pieces is part of it, but it's her recipe. Others come, people think, oh, that you're not making it right. This really, can you try to use a microwave, get it going a little faster? Nope, this is my tear soup. That's a fabulous book because it really lifts up how different this experience is for everybody, and it should be. And that needs to be honored, right? Really recommend that book. And this is where this title of this sermon, The Art of Loss, comes in. Art is not one way. Art is not one thing. Art isn't even one medium, right? There's so many different mediums that art can take. Nobody makes it the same way. People don't interpret what the same piece of art is interpreted multiple ways. Some people like it, some people don't like it. There's different styles. What's good to one, what's good to somebody is total discord to another. And yet, it's not up for all of us to make those discussions. The art is art. Grief is like that. There's an art to it. It's when you really dive in and choose to do the work of grief, it's not going to look like anybody else's. Not everyone's going to agree with it. Good grieving to some is total discord to another. It takes patience. It takes dedication. It takes a willingness to go into something not knowing what the outcome is going to be. That's the art of dealing with loss. The art of grieving. I know I've already got into a number of metaphors and illustrations already in this sermon. And definitely not following a typical sermon writing pattern, that's for sure. But I don't know what's going to resonate with everybody in here today. I don't know what's going to resonate with you. And that's the thing with where we are right now. The same idea or metaphor or tactic or skill set or story is not going to work for everyone. Our timing is going to be different in how we engage with the work to be done. Our needs are going to be different. Our experience sure are different. Nobody's experience is the same in this. No one. It's just that in and of itself is really wild. I work at Meadville Lombard Theological School. I'm a professor and an administrator there. And just this change and shift of going into the office, which we have really not gone into the office much, whether it's at my work or like my wife's job, same thing. Some people are loving not going into the office. Some people are craving that connection. Some folks, it depends on the day. I know that's going on with school. I know that's going on in a lot of different circumstances, right? And not even different for the same people. So in one job, it may be a little easier for me to work offsite, but I'm also a chaplain. I'm a chaplain with the Air National Guard. And in that job, when I've had to do that distance, it's so much harder. And I crave being able to be with my people. So this doesn't even work the same way with the same person over the same event, like something like a pandemic. It's going to take art. It's going to take not having to color inside the lines all the same way, all the time. It's all different parts of the spaghetti. Different parts of the spaghetti. Here's a hard thing. Conflict comes when we insist that everybody be in the same place. And often really what our insistence is not that everybody be in the same place, it's that everybody be in my place where I'm more comfortable. That's where conflict comes in. And that comes in individual interpersonal relationships. It also can happen within communities as well. And it's complicated. This is a really good time to focus on our principle around encouraging spiritual growth with one another, because without deepening our roots within spiritual growth, because this is a moment for spiritual growth. This is a moment for spiritual growth. It's going to make this so much more difficult. And it's already hard. I mean, individually, all those things, any of those things that I listed at the beginning would have been hard just on their own. But now add the pandemic. You know, I've been part of the UU trauma response ministry team since about 2007. And I have worked many large scale as well as small scale events. One of the things that's so different and so complicated about this pandemic that we are still in, it's so different because typically disasters are more regional. Crises are more regional. And therefore, you know, the folks, there's a certain group of people, again, not always regional, but typically things happen within a physical locality, right? And folks on the outside may be affected, but not quite in the same way. And, you know, if you have the ability and the advantage to be able to go somewhere else, to get a break or to find a new space. Right now, there's nowhere else. The pandemic is all over and all at the same time, which also means some of the places that we would have gone for relief, they can't give relief because they're in the middle of it too. It's so much more complicated right now. And that's a reality. That's a reality, right? You know, the power goes out, right? Snowstorm, ice storm hits. I know that's happened recently. An ice storm hits and absolutely brings things to a standstill. And that's happened before, but on top of a pandemic, when other mobility is difficult, and when, you know, your ability, the way that you get to connect has been through things like having electricity and internet, and now that's gone. It's hard. With this being so hard and overwhelming much of the time, and this likelihood of increased conflict, it's really tempting to want to push through to healing. All right. Now I've got another illustration. We bought an old house. My wife and I, we bought an old house in Chicago on the South Side about a year and a half back. And it's awesome. Built in about 1890. It needs work, right? It was not a renovated old house. It is an old house in need of renovation. And, you know, a lot of the outsides, it's been a long time since it's been painted, and, you know, it has good structure, right? The foundation is decent. The roof is pretty new. Got some new electrical systems that were already in place before we got it. But there's, you know, porch needs to be repaired, replaced, and lots of other things that need to happen. And, you know, it's tempting to just want to like power wash it, paint it, you know, paint the porch, just take care of you know, plant the flower beds. It's spring, get that done, and just make it kind of feel clean and just let's move into it and not worry about the rest of it. If any of you have had old houses, right? The bad thing about that is that if you just take care of the surface and you don't take care of the underneath stuff that needs to be taken care of, the pipes, some pipe pieces that need to be taken care of, making sure that the delaminated plaster over lath that's on the walls and the ceiling in a couple areas where there was a roof leak many years ago. If we just paint over that, all the stuff comes through at some point. All the stuff's going to come through. We just can't make it beautiful and not fix the underneath. which means that this whole process of this house is going to be slower than we want. It's going to take probably more people than just me working on it. I don't know if it's, it's another piece too, right? It may take a little more money and a little more resources in the initial stages to get working on it, but it's likely to make it so that we don't have emergencies later. So the more resources may not be needed later if we take a little more of the resources up front, right? One thing's for sure, if we rush, it's likely that the problems are going to come back and probably come back bigger than they are right now. Well, that same illustration, right? That works with us too. So then now the question is, so what are we going to do? What do you do? What are the pieces, right? Not to rush in to fix everything, but what are the pieces of the work of grief, that work of healing? Well, there's a lot of different things. And I will tell you this right now, as many people as there are here, there are at least that many different ways to do this. Okay. So it's going to be individual, but I want you to think about things like therapy, like being in community, sometimes being alone, making sure you're connected to friends, but also being able to have time to write or to sing or to meditate, finding some balance in this. Sometimes there are things we can do in person. Some things are going to have to be virtual. A phrase I heard recently that I really liked is coming up with restorative, simple, and small activities. Healthy bedtime habits. I really like that. Art of whatever kind, right? Of whatever kind. The other thing I want to just say about art that's awesome is it doesn't have to be good to be art. You don't have to be a great painter to be able to get out some of what's happening in paint, or a fabulous writer to journal. You don't have to be a good singer to be able to experience song. And the same goes with dance, right? Whatever those pieces are, only you are going to know what those little bits of work are. And again, I don't think it's any one of these things. I think it's a lot of it. And there will be a time, right? As they say in Ecclesiastes, right? There will be a time for therapy, a time for community, a time for friends, a time for alone, a time for outside, a time for inside, a time for virtual. There's going to be a time for all of it. Taking the time for all of it is going to be the key. And one thing that I will say to consider in a theological language that Carrie Doering, who's an author who writes about pastoral care, she talks about considering, is this a life limiting choice? As in, is it making things kind of a little bit smaller? Or is it more life affirming or life opening? And those are some considerations as you're thinking about, wow, I want to be alone right now. Well, do I want to be alone because I'm hiding from something, or is it because I need some solitude? Is that opening or closing? And sometimes alone can be either one, only you know, right? So pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. You get your own tear soup. You get to decide what that recipe is. All right, now I want to jump back here as we close. I want to jump back to the story for all ages. I want to remember the story of the lotus seed. Ba, right, the grandmother, she experienced so many losses. And yet this story for me is a lesson in resilience. Now, Ba grabbed that kernel. She grabbed that kernel of something that was special, a symbol of her past and her people. But it was also a symbol of what she valued, a symbol of those things that are bigger than just one thing or just one word or phrase. It connected her to what she valued. And she wrapped that seed and she put it under her family altar. It was special. It was sacred. It was something she could hold in her hand, but boy, it was more than just a seed. And then she brought it with her when she had to leave, yet another loss. But she brought, even through that loss of her country, her homeland, she brought that kernel of what was special, important, what she valued, what she was connected to. She brought that seed with her. And as time went on and she was ready, she told the story of that seed to people who were dear to her. And then it was gone, lost in the mud. Now, she thought it was gone forever. The seed that she had kept so safe, so protected. That seed needed the muddiness, the messiness of the mud to blossom. And then once it blossomed, she was able to share in the pod more seeds, and she was able to share much more fully. Resilience. Right now, seeds are being planted. Just remember, for that blossom, we just can't skip the mud. As the weeks go by, remember all my metaphors, all my stories. Come up with your own. Most importantly, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Amen. Blessed be.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
This is the time in our service when we pause to reflect on the gifts we have received from this abundant earth and the generous spirit of family and community, to consider what we have given and what we are grateful for, During the musical interlude, please consider what gifts you have to offer the Wolf community, whether it be financial support or the special gifts of your time or talent. We are grateful for your offering. Let us remember that love built this community. We are warmed by fires we did not light and shaded by trees we did not plant. Wolf exists because of the commitment of all those who came before us. And we know that Wolf's future health depends on our commitment in the present. Join me, please, in our affirmation of gratitude and giving. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others. As we extinguish our chalice and conclude our time together, may the words, song, stillness, and common breath of this hour remind us that every step of the way is never one we take alone.
Carry the flame of peace and love until we